Always a good idea.
Good morning. Looks like we have, oh gosh, at least 20 people here. So thanks for joining this morning. Welcome to the 2020 Montana Brewers Conference. It's been a chaotic and challenging year, to say the least. While we're disappointed we can't all gather in Missoula this week for the conference, we're glad that we're able to do this 5-day conference virtually. And I want to thank you for joining and being a part of it. A big thank you is in order for all of our sponsors. They've been tremendously generous with their support. First of all, I want to thank our tour sponsors, Gallatin Valley Malt, McDantum, and Montana Craft Malt. They stuck with us as tour sponsors, even though we had to cancel our 3 Brewfest this year. So a big thank you to all of our tour sponsors. I also want to thank our gold level sponsors, Crosby Hop Farm and Montana Press Monthly, as well as our silver level sponsor, Whipfley. And we have several bronze level sponsors to thank: All Things Trivia, Anderson's or Malin, Arrived, Brees Malt and Ingredients Company, First West Insurance, JCCS, and Glacier Hops Ranch. And finally, our copper level sponsor, Montana Wildlife Federation. Again, thank you to all of our sponsors. I have some announcements to share as well before we kick it off here with Neal Stewart, our keynote. You won't want to miss virtual pub trivia on Wednesday at 4 p.m. The social activities we organize at the conference are always a big hit. We're glad to be able to fill that void with this happy hour event on Wednesday. It's going to run from 4 to 5:30 p.m. Just like with these conference sessions, we'll be sharing the link for pub trivia via email and a calendar item with everyone that's registered for the conference. And when you join for the pub trivia, you'll get assigned to a random team, be a chance to meet some new folks, and we certainly encourage you to bring a beer or two and enjoy a beer virtually while we do pub trivia on Wednesday. Like I was mentioning, we will be sending an email to registered attendees each evening and each morning with a reminder of the upcoming conference sessions and the link that you will need to join. We'll also be sending all conference attendees calendar invites each morning for that day's sessions. So those went out this morning. Hopefully folks were catching those. We're trying to make it as easy as possible to get that information in front of you and get those reminders to you. We'll also be collecting conference attendee information, and we'll share that at the end. So all of you have each other's contact info. When we get together in person, of course, we exchange business cards. It's a little more difficult to do virtually. So, and we do this with the regular conference anyhow, and the same deal. We're going to, when it's all said and done, we'll compile all of the conference attendee and sponsor information and share that back with you so you have each other's contact info. We will also be recording each session and collecting presenter slide decks. So we will have those to refer back to after the conference has ended. And like the contact list, we'll be sharing those materials as part of our post-conference follow-up. This afternoon at 1 p.m., we have Bart Watson from the Brewers Association taking us on an economic and industry deep dive. And for I'm not going to run through it all right now, but you can view the full conference schedule at the website, montanabrewersconference.com. That's also the place to send folks to register if you know people that want to attend and haven't registered yet. Just send them to montanabrewersconference.com, and we'll start to include them in all of the communications to share the conference schedule and share those links so they can join the sessions. We are so pleased to have Neal Stewart as our keynote this year. Neal is the Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Deschutes Brewery. And prior to joining Deschutes in 2019, Neal was the Vice President of Marketing at Dogfish Head for 5 years. He started his career in the beer industry with a rebranding process for Pabst Blue Ribbon, which resulted in 3 consecutive years of growth for the first time in more than 20 years. I think we're all familiar with how successful that rebranding was for PBR. There will be some time at the end for some Q&A. Feel free to type questions in the chat. I'll be monitoring those and flagging questions for Neal at the end. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Neal. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, give Neal a moment to get his presentation up, and we'll get going. So thank you, Neal, for joining us. We're so glad to have you here. Welcome to virtual Montana. Next time we'll have you here in the flesh.
Yeah, wish I was there. Wish I was there for sure. Can't wait until the days of getting together with fellow craft brewers and having a beer resumes. Hopefully it's not too far in the future. So yeah, I'm going to share my screen here. Just give me a second to get this queued up. I'm going to jump over to presentation mode. That works. There we go. Matt, how does that look?
That's perfect.
All right, great. So yeah, well, thanks for the intro. Thanks for having me here. Excited to talk to everyone. And I've definitely created this, at least in my mind, on a timeline that will allow some Q&A at the end. I'll apologize in advance for any dogs barking in the background. I'm sure all of you have had those challenges as we've started working from home more frequently. So anyway, I'll jump into it here. Excited to talk to you guys today. So Matt gave a little bit of an intro. I thought I'd do a little bit of the same. So, I've been in the beer business for 20 years officially now. So I started at Pabst. Actually, I'm from St. Louis originally. I should probably go back even a little bit further. And I worked on the agency side for the big giant brewery that I guess kind of used to be based in St. Louis. Maybe they're based in New York now. I'm not sure. So worked on the agency side there. And that gave me just enough experience when I up and moved to Austin, Texas in the spring of 2000, not 2020, 2000. And I applied for a job at Pabst Brewing Company, which was down in San Antonio of all places. I guess they just announced that they're moving back to San Antonio after being in Chicago for a while and LA for a while. They're going back to San Antonio. So anyway, worked at Pabst for about 6 years. And as Matt said, I got a chance to work on PBR for the most part, but also worked on a variety of other brands. I guess the most meaningful to the group here today would be Rainier. So worked on Rainier during a time when the brewery had relocated down to Urbandale, California. So it was a contract brewed with Miller at that time. So it was difficult to market a brand in Seattle, Washington, where, we all know the consumers in the Northwest are so provincial. And but we were able to rebound that brand a little bit, and it seems like that brand's still doing pretty well today. I always had an interest in craft beer. So when I left Pabst, I had an opportunity to move to Denver, Colorado. My wife is from Colorado originally, and I worked for a brewery called Flying Dog for a few years. So I got my feet wet in the craft brewing industry. Took a little bit of time outside of craft brewing, worked on the agency side for a bit. But as Matt said, I worked at Dogfish Head from 2014 through 2019, and then came out here to Bend, Oregon at Deschutes last spring, so the spring of 2019. And I'm a marketer by trade, so I took my job at Deschutes as the VP of marketing, but then have assumed the responsibilities of sales and marketing at Deschutes for the better part of this year, going back to about right before COVID-19 hit. So anyway, that's been interesting. But yeah, I would say most of my time these days is focused on the sales responsibilities, leading our team. And most of what I'll talk about today is probably going to be more focused on that. So I thought as we jump into this, we might as well talk about what's on everyone's mind, which is obviously the pandemic and the major shift that's providing within our business. And that means navigating these crazy times. So it's not just the pandemic, it's social unrest, it's the economy. There are several things that we all need to be thinking about and planning for. And I wanted to kind of address all of that through the lens of how we're thinking about it at Deschutes Brewery. And although we might be a larger brewery than most of the people who are at this presentation today, I think there are lessons that we all can share. And quite honestly, at Deschutes, we still think like a fairly small company. It's no secret that Deschutes has been around for over 30 years. We've actually had some difficult times in the recent past. And I think kind of getting away from the mindset that we were bigger than we thought we were and moving back to more of a small brewery mentality has been a big help for us. So I'm going to share some of that. So we're going to look at everything kind of through the lens of what we've been challenged with here at Deschutes. I wanted to start with this. So these are our core values at Deschutes. And these are things that, we use these phrases in many meetings, and I use this as a guide for not only how do I work with people on my team, but I also use it for really making business decisions. And there's one of those values in particular that I'm going to talk about quite a bit today, which is, I'm going to get to that. But I want to talk first about the craft beer business and that we have a lot of different customers. So I wanted to go through those types of customers really fast. Most of us have commercial brewing operations, but also started or maintain our brand as a pub. So we have customers who are coming into our pubs and tap rooms every day. We have customers who buy our beer. So those commercial and wholesale operations, the end consumer, the end shopper might even be a better word, but we have those customers who are buying our beer. They're important. We have our retail partners. So people that are choosing whether our beer makes it onto the shelf or not, whether we get a display or not, whether we get the right shelf placement or not. Those are our partners. And then, yes, distributors are our customers as well. And I wanted to kind of talk about that today. And as we go through this, I'm going to give you 3 key takeaways through this presentation. But more than ever, this first takeaway is more than ever, you've got to have a customer mindset. And knowing who those customers are at different points of time is critical to how we do business. And I want to talk about distributors in particular as our customers. So why do we need to be thinking about distributors as our customers more than ever? I have a couple thoughts on this. The first one would be the proliferation of craft brewers has really shifted the power back to distributors. So back in those days when I worked at Flying Dog Brewery, we could pretty much open any market that we wanted. There was a distributor out there that would sell our beer. It was probably the distributor that we wanted to do business with, because all of those distributors were kind of shopping for brands. If you've been to the Craft Brewers Conference over the course of the last, I'd say, 10 to 15 years, you've probably seen a kind of a progression of how distributors and how many distributors are attending that conference, because 10 years ago, it was kind of a shopping trip for them. They scheduled meetings with suppliers. They were all about building out their book. And lately, back when the Craft Brewers Conference happened in person, it kind of shifted. Not as many were attending. It was harder to get those meetings. And it's because they've built out their portfolio. They've built out their book. So the land grab is no longer on as it was, like I said, 10 years ago or so. And why is that happening? It's because they have enough business to kind of keep them busy. They have enough business to fill up their trucks and their warehouses. So as a result of that, the power has shifted back to distributors because they can decide who is going to be successful within their portfolio. And the second point that I wanted to share here is how they are managing their portfolio. So I have this little matrix here to kind of, make this simple, but a lot of distributors are looking at their brands based on profit and potential. So to the right, as we look at the profit axis, to the right would be more profitable brands. So the stars and the cash cows, those are the ones that towards the top, the stars, very high potential, very high profit. In the lower right are the cash cows. They're profitable, but they don't have much more potential. So the distributor is going to keep selling them. As we shift over to the left-hand side, we have the high potential, but maybe low profit. Maybe volume isn't that substantial quite yet. Well, those are question marks. Those are brands that they're maybe willing to take a shot on, but they just don't know what the future holds for them. And then obviously the dogs in the lower left-hand corner here, low potential, low profit. Those are brands that are being killed out of distributor portfolios. So knowing where you stand within their portfolio strategy is incredibly important. And that's why one of the things that I'm going to provide to you today is this thought that we really have to treat our distributors as our customers. They are the first customer that we have. If you get kind of inundated or overwhelmed with thinking about every single consumer or shopper out there, before you have that great distributor relationship, you're probably going to trip up on yourselves. So wanted to kind of share that thought with you of the importance of building that relationship with your distributor. So coming back to those values, which the one that I think of most often is this one called blow our customers' minds. And when that was first created here at Deschutes, it was before I worked for the company, but that mindset was really all about that end consumer, that end shopper, or the person actually consuming the beer. And one of the shifts that we've made at Deschutes is to think about that as our distributor first and foremost, retailer second, and then customers and shoppers after that. You kind of have to have this progression of getting your business straight in that order, because you could have the greatest consumer marketing program or plan, but if your distributors don't support it, it really never gets off the ground. So we set out every day to blow our customers' minds, but that really just means our 200 distributors around the country. So that's what, that's a little splash page to show you that. So that's really the first thought. That's the first key takeaway is, know who your customers are at all times, and set out to have that customer service mindset. Second thought I'm going to share with you today is kind of a let's go back in time approach to it. So we're going to go back to the 80s and mid 90s, and I've made up my own time periods here. And I call this the mom and pop era. So this is, the era when, kind of going left to right, we had the Widmer brothers launching a brewery in Portland. We had Gary Fish, my boss, launching Deschutes in the late 80s. We obviously had Ken Grossman launching Sierra Nevada in the early part of the 90s, or I'm sorry, the 80s. And, that was that was a time period when, the business was very different. I call it the mom and pop era because that's really the way that these guys treated their business. It was kind of fly by the seat of your pants. Gary tells a story quite often that when he started Deschutes Brewery, it was only intended to be a brew pub. And the way that he was marketing the brand was by starting commercial and wholesale sales. So he picked out a few key points around Bend, Oregon, Mount Bachelor, Black Butte Ranch, where he wanted to sell his beer, but that was really only to drive people to his pub. And lo and behold, that starts to take off. I think a lot of people in this meeting probably know how that goes. You set off to do one thing and you get a different result, and you take that as an opportunity. So, that was back in the day when the business wasn't really all that sophisticated. It was all about brewing great beer, finding your niche, and then taking advantage of the opportunities that present themselves. As we move into mid 90s through 2005, that's when a lot of brands that I kind of call the trendsetters started to emerge, whether that was, Dale's Pale Ale being a trendsetter of, selling beer in a can, Pliny the Elder, my old Stomping Grounds Dogfish with 90-minute IPA, Allagash White. So a lot of those trend-setting beers launched around that time. You can see how they're very, very, very different packages, ranging from 22-ounce bombers to 750 milliliter bottles to cans. The packaging was really kind of all over the place back then. As we go from 2006 to 2010, I call this the beer geek era. This is when craft beer festivals really became a trendy thing to do. This was all about extreme beers. How high could you get that ABV? Sam had a show on the Discovery Channel. So everything was great in the world of craft beer around that time. From 2011 to 2015, we saw this huge explosion of breweries. The business became much more competitive. It was definitely a fun point of the industry because shortly thereafter, we started to see craft beer go mainstream. From 2015 through the present, we've seen consolidation across brewers. We've seen the big breweries get involved in the business. So that really changed the landscape of how brands both, kind of presented themselves to the trade, but also how they marketed themselves. So my point of view is that during that time frame, if you remember Gary Fish, Deschutes on that very first slide, was a kind of a participant in all of those different eras, but craft beer really became a rat race. And my point of view is that Deschutes got caught up in it. we started playing someone else's game, and it didn't work. And when I say that we started playing someone else's game, what I mean by that is we started watching what some of the other breweries did, whether that was an independent, one of the larger independent craft breweries, or maybe one of the big corporate conglomerates that owned one of those faux craft breweries. And they started to initiate a lot of big marketing campaigns, whether those were like large experiential events that traveled the country or big advertising campaigns. We've kind of all seen those big initiatives happening out there, and Deschutes started to follow that. And what we found is that didn't work for us. We kind of got pulled off of our strategy. We got pulled off of who we were as a company and a brand. So we didn't take the opportunities that were staring us right in the face. A couple of those examples, very simple ones, would be, we're in cans now, but we were late to cans. We should have been looking at that opportunity sooner. We just launched an Imperial IPA as part of our portfolio, like literally just a couple of weeks ago. As I look at that brand probably should have been launched a couple of years ago, because there was a definite need within our portfolio for that brand. And so instead of taking those opportunities that were staring us right in the face, we got distracted with other things and kind of admiring what these other breweries were doing. So the lesson here is we've now decided that it's time for us to play our game, and we have to be very clear on what that means to us. Every single company, every single brand has their own game that they play, their own strategy. And I really encourage you to know what your game is and stick with it. So what does it mean for us? Really what playing our game right now means is getting back to the fundamentals of selling beer. We've got to get back to providing that great customer service to our distributors, but also getting back into the trade and getting our packaging right, getting our pricing right, kind of those 5 Ps of marketing that you've probably heard of before. We know that we brew great beer, but we have to be great at selling beer. So we've implemented training programs for our sales team. As I look at that as an investment, I could spend $50,000 on a training program or $50,000 on a marketing initiative that is gone within 6 weeks. Which one means more to us right now? I would say that it's the training program for our sales team. Taking the obvious opportunities. Again, I've mentioned cans and that Imperial IPA. Another obvious opportunity for us is that we haven't fully built out a couple of our brands that still have a lot of runway, which are Fresh Squeezed IPA and Fresh Haze IPA. So we need to take those opportunities that are sitting right in front of us when we know that we could grow a brand that already has a lot of scale, like Fresh Squeezed. If we grow that 5%, well, that's a heck of a lot more than growing a brand that hasn't sold 1 case of beer yet, 100%. And then finally, I guess I have 2 more. Avoiding distractions. This is something that I really preach to our team, understanding what is adding value to the company and to the brand, and then what is a distraction, what is taking us away from our strategy, and being mindful of that, being mindful of what are those distractions and learning to say no to them as soon as possible. Finally, the focus on the flagship 4. I'm going to share this with you here in a little bit. This is kind of our strategy of narrowing down the focus from loving all of our children equally, which is an easy thing to do. We all have experienced that within craft beer, but knowing what brands are going to make or break us by the end of the year. And this was a term that we coined right when COVID-19 hit. We all saw that, consumers changed their purchase behaviors, and they shifted back to the brands that they knew and loved from Deschutes. So we started calling that the flagship 4. So we've maintained that focus. And laser focus is a phrase that I use all the time. We have to have laser focus. We can't get distracted with all these other exterior kinds of opportunities that exist out in the world. So my second takeaway here is play your game. Don't get caught up in watching what other breweries do, no matter what their size. They might be bigger or smaller than you, but know what your game is. Set your strategy, play your game, and do what's right for your business. Okay, I'm going to get into the third one here. And it really starts with us. I tell our distributors all the time that we aspire to be their best supplier. And that's a lofty goal, because we know that there are thousands of breweries in this country. So to be the best supplier for all of them is maybe impossible, but that's okay. We aspire to be their best. That's kind of our North Star in how we work with our distributors. So I want to share what that means to us. And the first part, you could probably kind of guess, we've decided that, we want to be a brewery that builds brands and gets off the innovation treadmill. And what I mean by that is, well, I'll tell you what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean that we're going to stop innovating. We're going to continue innovating. I said just a minute ago that we just launched an Imperial IPA called Royal Fresh. We're just doing it differently. We're going to launch brands in much more of a methodical manner than we have in the past. In the past few years, there's been this feeling of, let's launch a brand across our entire 32 state footprint. Let's get chain distribution and off we go. It's going to be a great success. Doesn't quite work like that, even for a brewery of our size. What we're hearing from our retailers is you got to prove it to us in your home market first. Once you prove that you can sustain yourself in your home market, then you can start to expand from there. So we are going to continue innovating. We're just going to do it differently. But what I mean by the treadmill is that in the past we've had this attitude of, all right, well, we know certain brands are going to decline. Let's say they're going to decline by 5,000 barrels. Well, we better find a new brand to fill that gap. And so we do that, or at least we try. And that's the treadmill, where you're constantly doing that every year. You're filling the gap, and you're not really sustaining yourself, and you're not really growing brands. So that's why we've shifted our mindset back to building brands. I mentioned Fresh Squeezed and Fresh Haze just a little while ago. That's our intention moving forward. We want to build those brands. I talk to our distributors quite a bit about quality, consistency, and reliability. We know that the quality of our beer speaks for itself, so we're very proud of that. We're also very proud of the way that we can execute for our distributors. So 97% of our orders have been shipped on time year to date. That's a great data point for us to share with our distributors. We also ship extremely fresh beer. So 89% of our orders have been shipped with over 100 days of date code, 98% with over 80 days of date code. So that's one way that we demonstrate value to our primary customer, which is our distributors. Reasonable expectations. I think this is a really important point. We've been known for this at certain times, and I know that we're not the only ones either, but I've told our distributors that we're not going to be the supplier that comes to annual business planning meetings with crazy volume goals. We can't be known as business partners when we walk into a meeting and we were down 18% 1 year, and then we want to grow 10. We want to make that plus 10% in the coming year with a 28-point swing. It's just not going to happen, at least in that planning phase. Maybe it does happen, but committing to that number is not going to sit well with our business partners. Do we want to stretch ourselves and grow our business as much as possible? Yes, absolutely we do. But betting the farm on it at this point in time, I think for any business, craft beer, or you might sell ping pong paddles. I don't know what you sell, but betting the farm on getting that kind of growth right now is a really risky proposition. So reasonable expectations, kind of sustainable growth, I think is where it's at right now. Laser focus and clear brand priorities. It's kind of a hard thing for us to swallow, because we love our innovation. We love brewing new beers and testing new beers and building brands. And I think that's kind of why we're all in this business. But putting big bets on brands that haven't sold one case of beer, I think, again, that's a risky proposition. And it also doesn't provide a clear vision to your partner, your distributor, or your retailers on what your intentions are. You have to be simple. You have to be clear. You have to have, like I said, that laser focus. And then finally, marketing that drives return on investment. So this is a language that I've really brought to Deschutes and our marketing team. I know I'm talking to a kind of a different group of people here today that probably don't have large marketing budgets, but the thing that I would encourage you to really think about is every dollar that you spend. Are you questioning, A, do you need to spend it, and B, what is it going to drive for you? If you're not clear on what that marketing investment is going to do for you, you should step back and think about Again, should you spend it, and what are you doing? You should be able to measure everything. Ask the hard questions. Know what that's going to drive. There's a lot of spending that happens within this industry across breweries, probably even on the distributor level, where it's kind of like, let's throw a couple $1,000s out there, cross our fingers, hope that it works. We're going to place an ad in, such and such magazine, or we're going to put a billboard on the highway. I hope it works. But a lot of times you don't know if it works. So lean towards what you can measure right now, and you're going to see a lot more efficiency in your spending and your budget, and you're going to get a lot more satisfaction out of looking at your budget at the beginning of the year and the end of the year and knowing what you got. So along the lines of, that laser focus, I mentioned the flagship 4 earlier. This is how we've arranged our portfolio. This is going to be different for everyone. I wouldn't encourage anyone to copy this. You got to find a way to communicate it yourself. But for us, we have 3 brands that we think are kind of ubiquitous across our entire footprint. And those are Fresh Squeezed IPA, Fresh Haze IPA, and Black Butte Porter. So those are what we call the flagship 3. So I said flagship 4 earlier. We've changed it to flagship 3+1 because then on a quarterly basis, we let our distributor really choose which brand, or maybe even SKU in the case of variety packs, do they want to focus on, so that we have 4 brands that are the focus for every quarter of the year. If they wanted to choose one of those +1s and use it for the entire year, that's completely fine as well. So this is the clear, concise way that we communicate our intentions and our strategy to our distributors. And that's really the lesson here. Be clear, be simple about it. So the third takeaway here is find your focus. Play your game, find your focus, stick with it, and be very disciplined to that. So I'm going to just finish it off with a little recap. So I think these are maybe the 3 most important things right now. Have a customer first mindset. Know who your customer is in every situation, but be very customer service oriented. Play your game. Don't get distracted. Don't watch what other breweries are doing all the time. Be careful about how many trade publications you read, because I think people can get wrapped up in that quite quickly. And then find your focus and find a way to communicate it to your customers. I think if you do those 3 things in a year like 2021, which is in a lot of ways going to be a reset for the business. If you think about the business on a quarterly basis, the first quarter, as we cycle numbers, the first quarter is going to be pandemic era versus normal. So what does that look like? Q2 is going to be us getting hopefully out of the pandemic, but then cycling versus pantry loading that was happening during that time frame. Q3 is going to be, I guess, kind of like the market starting to loosen up, starting to open up a little bit. Tourism patterns changing. I know that's important in Montana. So that's going to be hard to forecast. And Q4, we have no idea. We have no idea what Q4 is going to look like this year. So it's going to be a year of a reset. And that's why I really recommend having this simplistic approach to your business. Customers first, play your game, find your focus. I think that's it. Sorry, Matt, I meant to pause at certain points to answer questions. I didn't do that, did I?
Not a problem. All right, let's see here. We have a question. Did you get rid of Mirror Pond? And if so, how did you make that decision? It is actually just not one of your flagships now, right?
Yeah, so it's definitely still part of our portfolio. Mirror Pond is an interesting brand because it's so critical to us in the Pacific Northwest, Oregon and Washington primarily. And we're very well known for Mirror Pond. But it's not a brand that travels quite as well. So the rest of our portfolio, or I guess our footprint, I should say, the rest of our footprint is more focused on what we call our fresh family. Mirror Pond, Fresh Squeezed, Fresh Haze. We have another brand called Little Squeezy. Those are our fresh family brands. They do better in markets like Southern California, Texas, Virginia, and so forth. So we still have Mirror Pond. It's just it's a different priority depending on the geography.
Great, thanks, Neal. Another question here: What results have you seen from this reset?
Yeah, in a way, it's a little bit too early to tell. I would say that this reset is pretty fresh. We just had our distributor summit 2 weeks ago. Early, I guess, yeah, about 2 weeks ago, and we unveiled it to all of our distributors. And I would say that great reception from them. And why wouldn't they have a great reception? I mean, I would say in a lot of ways, we've just done a lot of listening, and we're bringing what they've said to us, we're bringing it back to them. So I think more than anything, they're probably saying, well, great, you're finally listening. And that's okay. So I think the reset is really happening now. If I had to kind of think of it I would say we had a mini reset back in March when COVID really hit, and we reformatted and rebuilt our entire strategy, our entire business. We acted very fast. That would be another thing that I would kind of recommend to everyone is act fast and decisively, in this era. Business moves way too fast right now to pause and then spend 6 months or 12 months on your strategic planning process. You've got to act fast. We did that back in March. We introduced that flagship 4 concept, and that did very well for us. Our business is down in 2020, but we actually have an opportunity to make more money. Our EBITDA has a chance to be up in 2020, even though our business is down. It's because we've built we've rebuilt our cost structure and our entire kind of business model back. And so we're outperforming our projections. We went back and reforecasted the business in March, and we're outperforming those projections by a pretty substantial margin. Any other questions?
I do have another question, but I was having trouble getting off mute there.
Okay.
This is Matt. This question, I'm not sure who it's from. Todd Huff from Outlaw. He asked, I guess what I was really asking is, how do you decide when to retire a brand if its volume numbers are still good? Todd must have had that question about Mirror Pond earlier.
Yeah, it's a good question. Oh man. I think you got to think about it holistically as your total portfolio. You have to understand where cannibalization comes in. So if you are launching new brands, where is it going to source that volume? The reality is it is going to source some volume from your brands. Hopefully it takes mostly from other brands, but you have to acknowledge that first and foremost. I think you got to look at efficiencies and cost of goods. How different is that bill of materials than the rest of your portfolio? So if you're not getting good efficiencies from that bill of materials, and as the volume goes down and down, your cost of goods go further and further up. That's when you got to think about it. Where is that breaking point? When I was at Dogfish, we held on to brands quite a while there, usually too long. The way that I looked at it was, I'm trying to remember what the threshold was. But yeah, when it would sell, we came up with a volume threshold that kind of benchmarked against other brands. I wanted to say that when it started selling, God, I cannot remember, something like less than what our seasonals were during a certain month, then it probably wasn't worth keeping it on. So I don't know. That's a terrible answer, but you got to figure out financially what makes sense. What makes sense from getting the brand on the shelf. Are you competing against yourself? And then, what is that volume threshold where it's just not worth it anymore?
I'm not seeing any other questions from other attendees, but I have a question for you.
Yeah.
This is Matt. So you have your pubs in Bend and Portland, and I'm just curious, obviously they're a revenue source with your retail sales, but I'm wondering how they fit into your marketing plan. maybe previously in a regular world, and then now with all the challenges that that retail is facing?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I think pubs are a huge part of the marketing plan, and at Dogfish, we had a few different hospitality properties. We had 2 restaurants, we had an inn, and we leveraged those as a way to not only engage consumers but also kind of test different brands. We do the same thing at Deschutes. We have certain, data points that help us understand how successful a brand is when it's sold at our pub, as an indicator for whether it moves on to the next phase of innovation for us. So yeah, I think it's one of those opportunities that can sit right in front of your face, and sometimes you forget to fully leverage. An easy thing that we do at Deschutes is, we designate one day a week where our pubs are really the main topic of our social media. I think it's Sundays for us for whatever reason. Not sure if there's reason behind that choice of day, but it helps us to stay on a regular cadence for talking about our hospitality properties.
Thanks, Neal. Any other questions from the audience? We've got some time here. And if you don't want to type your question, if you want to speak your question, just flag that you have a question and we can bring you on live.
Sure. It's always tough on a Monday morning.
Well, I'm not seeing anything. Maybe give folks another minute. Well, thanks so much for joining us this morning, Neal.
Yeah.
A little earlier over there, so we especially appreciate it.
No problem. Happy to do it. Hopefully everybody got something out of this. It's a crazy time. I said, hopefully everyone got something out of this. I know it's a crazy time in the business, and I really wish everyone well. I think if we can slog through the winter might be a little bit difficult for all of us, but I'm hopeful that we come out on the other side and we're even stronger than we are right now.
Well, thanks, Neal. This has been great. Lots of good ideas, good food for thought. So it's a perfect way to kick off the conference.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Thanks, everybody.